No mai haere mai ki tēnei hui o te kaunihira. Welcome everyone, and I do especially want to welcome DIA and our representative Sarah. Thank you very much for being here this morning to answer our questions. Before we get underway, I'll just open up with a karakia. Tūtaua mai I runga, tūtaua mai I raro, tūtaua mai I roho, tūtaua mai I waho. Kia tau ai te mauri ora ki te katoa, haumi e hui e, tai ki. So we have Sam, who's also going to be here to help. Want to remind everyone that this meeting is being live streamed, and we are scheduled to be in here until 12:30, but we'll see how we go. So as mentioned, we have DIA present with us today. There's been significant government reforms that our councils across the country have been dealing with, but we are really grateful for the opportunity to have you here with us in Rotorua to answer any questions that we may have. So today is specifically about the Head Start pathway, which is an opportunity to essentially fast-track the Simplify local government reforms with the due date of 9th of August 9th of August to put forward our proposals. So first of all, I want to acknowledge that there's been a significant amount of work, many discussions across the Bay of Plenty region, including through the Bay of Plenty Mayoral Forum. RCE, Andrew, alongside other Bay of Plenty Cs, have been pulling together what potential functions could look like from local, sub-regional and regional. And we will also today have a presentation from staff on the timeline of these decisions and also what some of the criteria are that we will wish to confirm for our staff to then look at and collate further information. So we are still in very early days. There is a significant level of detail, including financial analysis and also community consultation that is unlikely to come through before the 9th of August. So the proposals that we put forward are a suggestion, which will then need to be approved by Cabinet. And if we choose to go through, we will anticipate having wider community consultation towards the end of 2026-27 for a Cabinet decision in May. So just reassuring everyone, there's no decision making today, but we hope that the questions and the answers and the general discussion, which please be as open as possible, will be helpful. And lastly, I just want to acknowledge that we have been fortunate to have the opportunity to meet with iwi chairs this week. I've also had a discussion with the Rotorua Chamber of Commerce, and the Rotorua NZ is also helping to get the views from our business community directly as well. Okay, so I'll hand over to Andrew to start the presentation. Please have your mobile phones on silent, and also welcome our media who are here today.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just talk through the first couple of slides, which are purely the agenda for today. We'll hand over to DIA, who will do their presentation. Sarah, I think you will give us some advice on how you want to do questions and answers through your presentation, and then we'll come back to the other slides from me and the team. So this will be a tag team between Sam and myself. We do have the rest of the executive team here on standby as well, so questions to anyone are welcome. So, Kamathi, if we can just move through the agenda. This is the proposed agenda for today, so Head Start pathway, that's going to be largely covered by Sarah. What is the unitary authority? We'll cover that very briefly. Go through the government criteria, our decision, or proposed RLC decision making, and the timeline for those decisions alongside the timeline of the government's policy. So with that, I might just hand over to Sarah for you to switch presentations. Thank you.
So, kia ora koutou. I'm Sarah Palashik, currently of the Department of Internal Affairs, DIA. From 1 July, I'll be part of MCERT, so that is the Ministry for Cities, Environment, Regions and Transport. So it's a reasonably large change for us too. What I'm going to do is I'm going to I'm going to talk first about what's an eligible proposal, and I've got 5 examples, and then we'll pause and we'll just talk about, make sure everyone understands what an eligible proposal is, because that's sort of the first gate. Then what I'll talk about is I'll talk about the assessment criteria, and then backstop and timeframe. So there'll be lots of time for questions at the end, but I will pause in the middle just to make sure, because in some regions where you've only got 3 or 4 councils in the main, reasonably straightforward. In some regions, such as yourselves, eligible proposal was a little bit more complicated. So I thought it's useful to kind of recap on the initial stage of simplifying local government, which was this idea that regional councils would go and mayors would form a board to lead regional issues. There was a lot of proposals, a lot of submissions on this, and so in response we have got what simplifying local government is now. So it's useful because I think when you think about backstop, that initial kind of suggestion of the potential of commissioners or boards of mayors still probably is in play, but it has been overtaken by this new Head Start pathway. So the Head Start pathway, you guys are probably all familiar with this. It's voluntary. The bullet point that I think is the most important on here is there is the potential for bespoke arrangements, and it's the thing that I feel the most strongly about. It's very seldom that central government says to anyone, what would you guys like? And this is the first time that I can remember it really happening for local government. So they are listening, they are open to doing things differently for people that are in the Head Start. It's open to territorial and unitary authorities, with the exception of Auckland, that want to come together to form new unitary authorities. So that's part of what makes an eligible criteria. We'll assess the proposals, but just a key point, delivering the new planning system is still a core business for all councils. So who can submit an outline proposal? Key thing is you need 2 or more. You need a friend. So a territorial authority or unitary authority needs to get together, and they can submit if they either represent, there's 2 tests, either the majority of the directly affected territorial authorities or the majority of the population. And we're going to go through some examples now because it seems really straightforward. It's a little bit more complicated in reality. So I've used the same 5 councils for all of my 5 examples. So you've got Council A, obviously it's not representative, it's got 100 people. Council B's got 20, C's got 20, D's got 10, and E's got 5. So in this situation, the green councils are the councils that are submitting the proposal. The 4 councils submit a proposal for a single unitary council. Council E does not want to be part of it, but it is eligible. It's an eligible proposal in 2 ways. Firstly, A, B, C and D are the majority of the councils, and secondly, they have the majority of the population. In Proposal 2, this is a sub-regional proposal, same idea, but in this situation, Council A and B say, our natural kind of community of interest is just A, B and C. C again doesn't want to be part of the proposal, but again, A and B have the majority of both the councils, 2 out of 3, and the majority of the population. So this is just, is it an eligible proposal? It's not whether it would meet the criteria. Third example, councils A, B and C put in a proposal for 2 unitaries. So if you wanted to use the language urban and rural, perhaps you could. The proposal is for a unitary for Council A and a unitary for the remaining councils B, C, D and E. And again, it meets the criteria because in this situation, the 3 councils are the majority of the councils and the majority of the population. In this situation, they've put in a proposal, so A, B and C have put in a proposal for 2 unitaries. They haven't said what will happen with Council D and E. The 2 unitaries are Council A and Council B and C. And my last example is just pointing out the fact that you do not have to stick with the current council boundaries. So in this example, Council A, B and C have put in a proposal for a unitary that covers A, B and half of C. So I've whipped through those 5 examples, but I'll pause here for questions, just to make sure that, that you're totally clear, because I've gone through really fast, what an eligible proposal is. So there's some examples that I haven't covered. Very happy to take questions.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick one from me. In this example, do we have to have agreement from Council C to split? Can say A and B want half of C, but C is not willing to split, then how does that work?
That would also be an eligible proposal. So yes.
Ineligible.
An eligible proposal. Eligible proposal, so yes. Because A and B are the majority of both the councils and the population, they could put in a proposal for part of Council C, even if Council C did not want that to be the case.
Thank you.
We'll go Councillor Timothy Benford and then Councillor Sanford.
Tēnā koe, Your Worship, and through you, just a question. So I think that may have answered it, but I just wanted to be really clear. So, for example, if we wanted to take or identify parts of various councils across the region, is that a similar process, or is it only if you're looking at one particular council C in a particular part, or can we say, within our preferred unitary authority, we want this from Council C, this from Council B, this from Council A, this from Council D. Could we do that?
You could, as long as you were the majority of the population and you had a friend that was going. So Rotorua couldn't say, I want a bit of A, B, C, D. But if Rotorua and a friend said, we want a proposal that has a bit of A, B, C, D as well, then yes, that would be, as long as the two councils proposing were the majority, you could do that. Yeah.
Majority of the region.
Majority of the, there's
of
two
the councils
tests.
proposing.
Either the majority of the councils proposing. So if 2 councils said, we'd like the 2 of us plus parts of 4 other councils, they wouldn't be the majority of the councils because they'd be 2 out of 6. But if they were the majority of the population, so they had 200 people and those other 4 councils only had, say, 10 people each, 40, that would be an eligible proposal.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just a supplementary, if I can, Your Worship. So, and this, by the sounds of it, doesn't give regard to regional boundaries. So these A, B, C, D could be cross-regional. Cross-regional doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question is, so A and B would be able to submit a proposal because they've got the majority of the population, and their proposal would be able to say that we set up 2 separate unitary authorities, one for each of us. So A would become a unitary and B would become a unitary?
So that would be an eligible proposal.
Yeah. So you submit together to get your separate outcomes. That's the...
The only word that I'm not so sure about there is get. Do you know what I mean? You submit to propose your separate outcomes.
Okay.
Whether you get them, whether it meets the assessment criteria, is a different test. But yes, 2 councils could submit for 2 unitaries themselves, if that would be an eligible proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Peterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you, thank you for the presentation. Very interesting. So on proposal example 3, that relates to actually further on as well, you state more than 1 unitary council in a region, which I imagine proposal example 3 is.
Yeah.
The criteria are the region is large and has more complex issues, so you referred to Bay of Plenty as that.
Yeah.
And the proposal clearly meets the criteria and doesn't lead to the fragmentation of key regional functions where collaboration is required, such as catchment management. But with proposal 3, there could be potentially a river that runs through 2 unitary authorities. How would that work?
So that is taken into account in the assessment criteria. So if there is a river that runs through, and because there's 5 assessment criteria, that would be taken into consideration about whether that eligible proposal is accepted. So you need to have an eligible proposal first, and then the assessment criteria, which I'll get onto, determines whether it will be an accepted proposal.
So from the catchment point of view, that's quite crucial. that how the catchments align and how they're going to be managed might have a significant impact on whether, let's say, proposal example 3 actually is going to get accepted.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions at this stage? Deputy Mayor.
Thank you. Just in an example there, what happens with, so you're saying that because the green ones have agreed, the red ones don't need to agree, but they need to be part of the proposal anyway?
Yes.
So what happens if they don't want to be part of it?
The way in which Head Start works, so it doesn't necessarily, so one of the things, and it's not an explicit criteria, although it kind of comes into achievability, if you had 2 councils, so all this part of the presentation does is say, is it an eligible proposal? In this situation, you would look at the assessment criteria and you would go, is it achievable if D and E really don't want to be in it? And that would be taken into consideration at that point.
So what would happen with those councils that effectively, I don't know, don't have any friends? Are they then just left marooned as sort of councils, or are they then going to be told you must join this region, that region, that region to get that?
Can I talk about that when I go to the assessment criteria and potentially backstop?
Okay.
And we'll just go to our CE now before we move on with the slides.
Thank you, Worship. Can I just looking at the policy proposal document there, which says proposals cannot be submitted by individual territorial authorities. Isn't this an individual territorial authority submitting to become a unitary?
The proposal is from A, B and C, but what it does is it proposes a separate unitary for A and a separate unitary for B, C, D, E. So the 3 councils have proposed the 2 unitaries.
So a joint proposal could have multiple unitaries within them?
Yes.
Okay. I had understood it differently. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll go to Councillor Wing. Councillor Wing.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for the presentation. Just following on from that then, but then is there a requirement that there must be shared services across those unitaries, or are they going to be standalone in-house?
No, there's no requirements. There's a requirement in the proposal to say how you will undertake the functions of a unitary. It doesn't say how that must happen. So it doesn't, there's no requirement for shared services. But let me just flick on to, once you've got an eligible proposal, you then have got these 5 criteria of how the eligible proposals are assessed. So the first one is deliverability, and when we look at councils that are reluctant, councils that have been included in proposals without their consent, that may impact deliverability. So ideally, if you put in an eligible proposal, it would be better for the councils within that proposal to want to be part of it. Taking the point about the river, it needs to support a new planning system, including all of those regional council functions. It needs to simplify local governance. So if you've put in a proposal, if 2 territorial authorities have got together and have said we're going to propose 2 unitaries, which could be an eligible proposal, there's a question about does that simplify local governance? Probably not. You've just created 2 small unitaries instead of 2 territorial authorities. Are there economies of scale, and does it maintain local voice? Now, none of these criteria have a minimum threshold that you have to meet, and there is an understanding that there are some trade-offs that you won't, that you may, some proposals may be stronger in deliverability. It may be easier to get a sub-regional proposal together than it is to get an entire region if it's a large region. But what the proposal will need to demonstrate is how you meet each of these 5 criteria.
Just one quick question, sorry, on the maintaining local voice. Within our current structure, I know there's been a lot of focus on regional councils and territorial authorities, but all of us if not all of us, very close, have community boards as well, which serve a really important purpose in ensuring that the wider areas of our district, for us that means rural and also lakes areas, are still represented. I'm just a little unclear on how these proposals that are only focusing on a unitary, and this may be for us to sort out later down the track, but where the direction or potential future legislation will incorporate or enable community boards to still exist.
So personal opinion, not minister's opinion or policy, I see this as one of the biggest opportunities in this. So if you look at, often when people say what was the biggest, what was the last big reorganisation of local government, they look at 89. But actually since then we've had the Auckland reorganisation, and that did some interesting things. It used some of the current mechanisms available in the legislation, like a CCO for Auckland Transport, but also what it did is it's created bespoke arrangements, and what it created was local boards. And when I've spoken to community boards, they all look over the fence and think that local boards are superior to community boards. Local boards are part of the Auckland legislation. The other thing that it set up is the independent Māori statutory board. So you don't have Māori wards in Auckland, but you have when I've been speaking to the independent Māori statutory board in previous roles, they thought was very successful, and the council thought was very successful. So I, again, personal opinion, think the maintain local voice is one of the big opportunities for the new unitaries to say what they would like. And my suspicion would be it would not be retaining community boards, because I think the local board model is a better model, and I actually think that there is potential for communities to think about what local voice means for them and to come up with a bespoke idea of how they would like to maintain local voice in their communities.
And we'll go to our Rural Ward Councillor, Councillor Barker.
Thank you. Interesting commentary there, thank you. Just round representation, this council is going through, we need to do a representation review this year. So my question to you, and you may not be able to answer it, is will this still be a requirement when we're going to need to be considering all these things we've just talked about? If we go down the Head Start process, we'll be doing it twice, basically.
It's a great question, and it has been put to Minister Bishop, and I think he is aware of that and will be attempting to find solutions to that.
So we should hear something soon around that?
I wouldn't want to use the word soon. I think you will hear something about that.
Magic, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we are very aware that it is currently a requirement for us, and it would be unlawful not to, so we are set with the burden of doing that. We'll go Councillor Timida, Ben Fowle, then Patterson.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship. Just a concern regarding the proposal assessment 5 criteria. Nowhere in those criteria does it mention iwi partners or our treaty settlements or anything with that regard, and I'm sure, or I hope so, that it hasn't been just captured in representation for communities of interest. I suppose my question is, what weight if iwi in a local area oppose the proposed structure by their territorial authority, not necessarily for here but across the country, what weight or what mechanisms are available for iwi to oppose those structures? Because I'd imagine, well, certainly not in this council, but in other councils, things like iwi boundaries and things like that won't be given consideration in their deliberations. Certainly been top of mind for us, but because I don't see that reflected at all as part of any of those criteria. So what does that look like?
I think the first thing that I'd say is any relevant governance arrangements from treaty settlements transferred to the new unitaries. So that is a bottom line. I think none of the criteria have a minimum, but there's, when you're in a procurement situation and you have a whole lot of proposals, and often you'll say, we'll weight cost 30% and we'll weight this 30% and this 20%. That's not how this works. There is no kind of official weighting. It's a kind of balance. And so what I would say is the iwi perspective will be one of a number of considerations. It will go to deliverability. It will go to community voice.
Sorry, just a supplementary if I can, Your Worship. So in the event that, because I see this is very focused on the process is very focused on the territorial authority proposing what it looks like. Yeah. In the event that our iwi partners completely oppose a particular proposal, what mechanisms are available for them to be able to challenge that? Because I understand that the government has set this bottom line condition around the transfer of treaty obligations and treaty settlement, but I think there's it's sort of like a catch in the essence that they're not being captured through the process, through the assessment criteria, and so it's almost like, yeah, we'll chuck your settlements over here with whatever comes out, regardless of what your opinion is on that. So is there, what's the process for them to challenge, is there a process for them to challenge what territorial authorities come up with through, I don't know if there's a process for that.
So there's no official process through Head Start, it would just be through your normal political processes that you would challenge.
Thank you. Councillor Peterson, then Deputy Kaifong.
And just one more on this particular subject. With regards to the wards, we've had our recent elections where it was through the referendum. Rotorua has adopted Māori wards and it will go through the next 2 election cycles. Will this legislation and moving to unitary authorities wipe that out?
The unitary authority is a bespoke authority for the region or sub-region. So you can have you can suggest anything. You can have Māori wards if Māori wards is what you want. Auckland has got the Independent Māori Statutory Board. You can come up with some other Māori representation. So it is totally open. It's a little bit like community boards. The opportunity of this is to say Rotorua and whoever you would combine with wants to have these arrangements to reflect our community and to get our community voice, including Māori voice. So Māori wards will not automatically be taken forward because we would be looking to see what you would propose for.
Sorry, I don't understand that because it was a legislation was passed. It was voted on by the community. We have Māori wards for the next 2 elections. Full stop. I don't understand how we can just decide to do other things.
So the creation of these new unitary councils and why they can be bespoke is there will be bespoke legislation. There will be a bespoke legislation for every new unitary council. So there will be a government act that's passed that says the unitary council for this area, should you be part of Head Start, looks like this. It's got this arrangement. It has, this number of wards, if you use that language. The mayor is elected at large. Māori voice is taken in. So it's effectively wiping the slate clean of what you've got at the moment and what apart from the fact it's unitary council and you know what the functions are through the Local Government Act, there is the opportunity to create it however you think best represents your community.
Thank you. I think your statement about wiping the slate clean was quite clear. Thank you.
Deputy Kaifong and then Councillor Sanford.
Okay, just changing the topic then. Just up there for the assessment of the proposals, it says supports the new planning system and it says including progress on the current sort of spatial and natural environment plan development and avoids or minimises disruption to that work, because that work's already underway effectively to reduce the number of sort of spatial and regional plans down from, about 100 to about 17. Is there something in that effectively a whole lot of small groupings is really not going to cut it, even though you've still got the other criteria, if you're going to need the size of the regions to get down to those regional spatial planning sort of areas?
Yes, so I think the Minister has indicated that for smaller regions, one unitary authority is preferred. For larger, more complex regions, you may have 2 or 3 unitary authorities.
So what's a complex region? Like what sort of the things that would be complex to allow a minister to decide that it needed
A large number of territorial authorities, many rivers potentially, there's a number of things that could lead to a complex region, but often it's a large number of territorial authorities.
And what's a large number? Like more than 5, more than 10, more than...
More than 4?
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Sanford?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had a question about, you mentioned bespoke legislation for each of these new unitary authorities. Getting legislation changed is very difficult and time consuming. So I imagine having bespoke legislation for each unitary authority is going to make things very inflexible. And so if we come up with a governance arrangement and we realise 2 years into the cycle that actually we would be much better suited if the governance arrangement was something else, it seems to me that would be a very inflexible way, because we would have to go back and change our legislation with the government at the time, and that normally takes a really long time to do. And I just, do you see my question to you is, do you see the lack of flexibility around that being an issue moving forward for these new authorities?
I don't think it would be any more complex than it is at the moment. I mean, at the moment, the issue is if you change the Local Government Act, you're changing it for every single council in New Zealand. Whereas going forward, if you had a specific act for your council, then if you were to change that, you're only impacting your own council, you're not impacting every council in New Zealand.
Supplementary. So this sort of comes back to the representation review part of it, because the way that I thought you were describing the bespoke legislation would basically be setting out in legislation what the representation would be, which then makes it would mean that we wouldn't be having representation reviews going forward, because that would be locked into legislation. Because my understanding is we don't need legislation at the moment to currently, every time we do a new representation review, we don't go back to Parliament to ask them to change legislation. So
I don't think it's been determined about how representation reviews will work for the new unitary authorities. I just think we haven't turned our mind to it. I don't think that once it's fixed, I mean, the idea of representation review is communities change over time and your representation arrangements need to change with those changes. I think that mechanism will still exist in the legislation in some way. I don't see the idea that you set up this council, this new unitary council, and you have these ward boundaries that are absolutely fixed and would need to be changed by legislation. I don't think but I think it would be more like if I use Auckland as an example, you've got 21 local boards that's set in the legislation. If you wanted to change from 21 local boards, you would need to change the legislation. You've got an independent Māori statutory board. If you wanted to change that, you would need to change the legislation. So it's slightly different from it being fixed.
Sorry, can I just jump in here? So for the Auckland Council one is probably a good example. So in their legislation, they specifically refer back to the Local Electoral Act, and so in that they say that they have their first one, and then they say every 6 years after that they'll complete a review of representation like every other local council does. So while changing legislation as a whole can be difficult, I imagine, just like how Auckland was set up with these unitary authorities, lots of those things that do need to be changed will probably refer back to either the Local Government Act or the Local Electoral Act. So that'll be the work that Cabinet and Parliamentary Services will do to ensure that those things that probably do need to be changed are changed as part of that, and then those things that don't need to get changed stay set in those. I imagine is probably how it works using the Auckland example.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Lee and then Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, let's just wind back a little. So, gosh, there's so much going on here. So if we was to join forces with, let's say, Taupo as an example, do I understand correctly that we would probably have something like a Taupo ward and a Taupo community board on this unitary authority? Is that how you imagine it working?
I suppose all I would say is I would expect in a unitary authority that included Taupo, that Taupo would have some voice in that authority, whether that took the form of a community board, a local board, or some sort of bespoke arrangement. The key thing is that they would be part of the unitary authority. So Taupo would be involved in electing the mayor at large for that unitary authority. But I expect, just as councils do now, your communities have some sort of elected, it's very few. I mean, in Auckland, they have some councillors that are elected at large and they have some councillors that are elected in wards. All of that is up for discussion in these new unitaries.
Okay, so following on from Councillor Sanford's question, there is such a thing as a local bill. Normally Parliament passes its laws with its bills. So if this was, would we be able to change our bespoke legislation with a local bill?
Yeah.
Okay. This bill, I think, is called the Simplifying Local Government Bill.
It's not a bill yet, it's just a proposal.
It's just a proposal, it hasn't been
a bill's got a technical name because it's something that goes into Parliament that's discussed that becomes legislation.
Isn't there a bill already in before Parliament called Simplifying Local Government or something?
No, Simplifying Local Government was a Cabinet decision, so there's a Cabinet paper that's been released that shows the Cabinet decision, but it's not a bill.
Isn't this a misnomer to call this Simplifying Local Government? Isn't this the end of local government?
It's not my belief. I think it could lead to stronger local government and better community representation.
Help me out with that, because I can't see that at the moment.
I think there's probably two parts to it. I think it allows communities to design local government in the way that they think best fits their community. And again, my own view, the Cabinet paper sets out some advantages in it, but my own view is that I think a smaller number of councils will actually be more effective, and particularly in their relationship with central government. And so I think it could be, again, maybe internal optimist here, it could be the rebirth of local government.
So if we've got, let's say, some Taupo councillors, they would come perhaps to Rotorua for a meeting, meet in this chamber perhaps. That's no longer local government though, is it? It's something more like regional, or maybe there's another intermediate name that we could have, but it's not local, is it?
Different people have different, I think it could, I live in Wellington. If I had an Upper Hutt person come, and maybe the centre of Wellington would be Lower Hutt, I would still feel that it was local government. It's very interesting talking to people in Auckland. And one of the things that's changed for a lot of people in Auckland, their identity used to be, I live on the North Shore. So they didn't think of themselves as an Aucklander, they thought of themselves as something that lives in the North Shore. They now, and I can't say for all 2 million Aucklanders, but a lot of Aucklanders that I've spoken to, now there's an Auckland city, feel like they are Aucklanders. And Auckland is a rather large council, but I still think, my own view is that it is local. It has got local boards. It represents Auckland as a place. So my own view is it is local government.
So I lived in Auckland for 5 years. I lived all over Auckland. The councils that became one unitary authority up there were all adjacent to one another. With what we're doing around here, there's a serious strive, at least we consider it so, between, let's say, here in Taupo, here in Rotorua, here in Whakatane. They're not adjacent like this, is it? Sorry. I just don't see where the mandate central government has to do something like this. Is there going to be a select committee process that we can feed back to this?
It's a voluntary process. So Head Start is local government led.
No select committee process.
No.
Okay.
So
I think
just,
we'll...
sorry, to jump into that, so when the pieces of legislation, my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, so there's the Head Start process, which we're talking about now, and then when government creates the pieces of legislation, then there'll be a select committee process in that creation of the legislation for anybody to give feedback through that process?
No, good clarification.
But the horse is bolted by then when it comes to doing this on a grand scale, isn't it?
I think we'll move on now.
Yes, I'll leave it there.
Thank you very much. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Thank you very much for trying to answer a lot of our apartheid questions. Two quick questions. One is, November the 7th, if there is a change in government and you live in Wellington, what? Big question. What are you aware of that might happen if there is a change?
So the way I would answer that question is probably in two ways. The first one is, and again this is personal opinion because none of us knows what's going to happen, any proposals that have got great ideas that are supported by the community for new forms of councils will be quite a strong voice to any new government. So if councils to get together and say, actually, we think our community would be better represented in this way, it doesn't matter who's in government, you've actually gone through quite a process, you've done quite a lot. The other thing that I'd say is Labor, the Labor Party has not got a position on this at this stage, so it's very hard to know. I have heard the Labor spokesperson saying that he is keen on regional deals, so that, again, the kind of idea of regions, but it is uncertain what, to be honest, any form of government in November will do.
Thank you for that. And my next question is, we're a very unique area in the Bay of Plenty, but especially here in Rotorua, the population of Maori in our area, the last census was 44%. We have our own Te Arawa Trust Board, which was celebrated a couple of years ago, 100 years. They have their own elections. We have a Te Tātou board here connected with us at council. What voice will they have with these proposals going forward?
The advantage I see of this legislation is that communities can determine what voice they, so you've got those relationships, you've got that demographic mix. Your council will look different. At the moment, the opportunity for your council to look different from a council that has got a lower Māori population in a kind of rural area of the South Island, you've kind of got one piece of legislation. Apart from Auckland, you're all pretty uniform, right? Okay, there's some unitaries, there's some TAs. This is an opportunity to go, this is what Rotorua looks like. Actually, our representation arrangements should reflect that. But it's not, at this stage, central government's not telling you how to reflect that demographic or those arrangements. What we're saying is we're really open to hearing from you about how you think that should be represented. Because at the moment, you can kind of, there's a number of ways you can do that, but they're quite limited about how you get Māori voice in council. Propose what you think the best vehicle for that is.
Thank you. Councillor Rakawa-Tate and then Councillor Lee.
Oh, thank you very much. Actually, you've explained it very well. And the thing that has really resonates with me is you saying that the opportunity to develop a bespoke council, and that suits our situation. But it's obviously, if you've got the numbers, you can do something. So, am I right really in saying, because we have the numbers and hopefully we've got good relationships, we might then eventually have something that could serve us far better than what we've currently got?
That's my hope.
Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Just, thank you, Madam Chair. Just clarifying this bespoke legislation idea, this means that the Local Government Act 2002 will be repealed?
It won't be repealed immediately. I think and again, we're talking kind of technical terms here. there's lots of things that the Local Government Act 2002 does, and so I'm sure some parts of it will be retained. But just like you've got the Auckland Act and you've got the Local Government Act 2002, I think both will exist. So you'll have another act that will, again, it could be 5 acts for 5 different proposals. It might be 1 act for all 5 proposals. I mean, all of that detail is yet to be determined. But I don't think there's no talk of repealing the Local Government Act because it does a lot of things, not just these bespoke.
Yeah, and if I can jump in, there's a section of the Local Government Act that lists the unitary authorities as an appendix and a schedule, and it's entirely possible, obviously Parliamentary Council Office will draft it, but it's entirely possible that that mechanism will apply and simply that schedule would be amended because, as you'll see later, a unitary authority is simply a territorial authority with some additional powers, which are then listed in the appropriate schedule of the Local Government Act. So it wouldn't require the removal of the entire Local Government Act to give effect to what this policy has outlined.
Thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. So I know this is a bit of a crystal ball gazing question, but we should have an end goal in mind. So what would success look like 10 years from now if this all rolls out? What does the government want to actually achieve out of this? What's success for them?
If I go to this, let me just quickly go through these slides because I think success to central government does look like a smaller number of councils, a smaller number of unitary councils. And what I've just done is I've put, I think there are about 4 of these options. And this is talking about a kind of complex region. And again, I've used the same very basic graphics. No AI, all seroplastic generated. That's why they look like this. So complex region, first option is you just have one single unitary. Second option is you have a kind of rural unitary and an urban unitary. Third option is you have 2 unitaries, one where the urban kind of looks north, that might be where most of the development's happening, and then you have a kind of southern, this is north to south facing. And a third option where you have 3 unitaries. So I think what success would look like for the government would be for the regions, and we've talked about the regional boundaries or the TA boundaries are not absolutely fixed, so it doesn't have to be exactly, it could better reflect iwi boundaries. I mean, there's opportunities in that. But success, I think, for the government would be for a reorganisation into a smaller number of unitaries. And any of those 4 options for a large complex region may meet the assessment criteria.
I see. So does that also translate to, lower rates for the ratepayers, less tax, what's the, other than just changing the structure of what we do, what's the real tangible benefit for doing this?
I think there's a couple of real tangible benefits, and I would call them efficiency and effectiveness. So, and people sometimes, I know they seem like really simple words. Efficiency is you do things more efficiently. You're buying rubbish bins for a small council. Suddenly, instead of buying 20, you're buying 500. There's just an economies of scale kind of argument. If you look at central government reform, put all of the HR and the rates, billing and all that together. So there's an efficiency argument. And then there's an effectiveness argument as well. And I think when you're looking at the planning system, and again, I know not everyone's the fan of Auckland, but if you look at Auckland, when there were 8 councils, North Shore and Auckland City were competing to who had the biggest sports stadium, right? There was a competition between the 2 councils about that. Once they were all in Auckland Council, you could actually look and go strategically, what are we doing in terms of sports stadiums? But sports stadiums is just one example. You can do that across all of those things. Again, Watercare has It was interesting, I think I was saying this to Andrew, when I was working at the Local Government Commission, Rodney wanted to move away from Auckland Council. Big move, put in a reorganisation proposal. The one thing that they wanted to keep was water care, because actually water care had delivered more effective water services, particularly for those rural populations of Franklin and Rodney, than the individual councils had ever been able to do. So that is an effectiveness argument. So I think that's what the government is aiming to achieve. And there's a little bit of a balance. Sometimes you're more effective and maybe you're not quite as efficient, and sometimes you might be more efficient.
Thank you.
And Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for answering all these questions, because it is quite a complex topic. And my one key concern around all of this is the fact that we have a very short time span to put these proposals in, 9th of August, they have to be in, which allows very little time for us to consult comprehensively with our community. We will be engaging with them. So enabling us to get the best possible outcome for ourselves and our potential neighbours who will become our partners in this unitary. Is there going to be enough time for us in the next parts of the process for us to effectively engage with our communities to make sure we get this right if we do go down this path?
I appreciate that 3 months is not a long time. What I would say is the 3 months is to submit an outline proposal. So an outline proposal, and there will be guidance coming out in the next week about what needs to be included in the outline proposal, but there is certainly no expectation that you will have sorted out exactly what your democratic system will be, or even potentially about how you provided for iwi voice. But what it does expect is the outline, so which councils you're going with are included in that. Now, even there's probably a little bit of wriggle room. So if there may be some communities, or some, if we go back to that kind of parts of council, that may naturally look a different way. So if there was a bigger unitary, there may be some boundaries within TA areas or within regional areas that you might think actually they make more sense. You may not have been able to resolve that exactly, and I'm talking about little kind of dotted lines. I'm not saying, oh yeah, this whole council, we don't know if they're in or not, but we are talking about, hey, we know this river goes here, it goes through this TA, we really need to consider whether it should be part of our unitary, but we need to talk to that community, like we haven't actually had the time to really do that. The line's a little bit dotted. I don't want to encourage too much of that, but I also know that would be a big change for those communities, and you may need a little bit more time. So in general terms, it's a pretty solid line outside of, the boundary of what your unitary is going to be, and some indication of what you think the plans might be and what you think you need to work on. There is, you obviously put a proposal in for Head Start, and a certain number will be accepted, so they assessed. Anyone who's accepted as a Head Start proposal will get a reasonable amount of support from officials to go through that process about, it will be MCERT by then, but the MCERT officials will be helping Head Start councils work through how to get to a detailed proposal. We're not going to go, oh great, tick, see you in March. There'll be a lot of work. And one of those things, again, it's not in the policy, it's a personal opinion. Say we get 6 Head Starts. One of those might have a really amazing idea of how to do local voice. We're going to be sharing that across, so there'll also be a bit of ability to talk about. Doesn't mean that you have to take it, it's bespoke, it's yours, but they're not going to be confidential proposals where, we're not sharing good ideas across. And similarly, for the backstop, if we hear some really great ideas in Head Start, then when we're designing the backstop, we are likely to propose those ideas as part of that.
Thank you, Sarah. And just if our community's listening, I'd just like them to understand that although, the time's been as short in this first part of this process, that if we do go down this track, then there is the opportunity to do these things and have a better, chance to engage with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Timera Benfell, followed by Sanford.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. A couple of questions from me. One is just a real sort of more practical question, because this is the sort of stuff we get asked all the time. So with stuff like, and I think I've heard it a couple of times, things with like CDM, where is the HQ of this new unitary authority going to be based? Alignment between CCOs and the unitary authority. Those are all things that are going to be determined once the structure or proposal is approved, or that'll be fully locally determined, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so what will happen is in your outline proposal you'll say, hey look, we've got these CCOs, or we've got this idea for a local voice, or we've got CDM, all of those kind of service decisions about where you have your service centres. There's no way you're going to be able to make those in your, but you will make those through your detailed proposal. And again, because it's bespoke, you may say, your legislation might say, we are always going to keep a service centre in this community, this community, and this community. It's in the legislation. Or you might say, we trust the CE of the day to make sure that the services are spread. You can kind of go either way on those. If there are things that you need to get your community comfort.
Okay, great. Okay, that's good to know. And the second one is, so with all of these unitary, and someone just stop me if this is off the line type of questioning, but with all these potential unitary authorities starting up, with the resources of our current regional council, I'm talking potentially the staff, what happens with that? Is there a reallocation or a division of based on what the unitary authorities look like? Is there what does that look like? Has the government given thought to that?
So again, one of the criteria when you get to when you are proposing more than one unitary in your region, what the proposal needs to do is talk about how those key regional functions won't get fragmented. So if I give you a really simple example where I've got a region and it's got 5 councils north and 5 councils south, and they decide both to be a unitary, they would then have to describe in their proposal how they would do those regional functions, right? So they might say, underneath our 2 unitaries, we've got a shared services arrangement, or they might say, hey, public transport's only important for the north because I've got public transport and the south doesn't have it, so we'll take over that function. Actually, we think that we've got sufficient people to set up 2, monitoring functions or biodiversity functions. So you might actually go function by function how you would do it. Okay. And again, the central government doesn't have a view on that. What we do have a view on is we can't undermine the regions and not provide good services regionally. But we're totally open to how the regions would like to do that. And again, this is where I think it might be different in different areas. So simple if you've got 1 unitary council, maybe reasonably simple if you've got 2. Starting to get a bit more complex if you've got 3, but still, if you've got a good idea how to do it, totally open to it.
Sorry, and just one more question, Your Worship. So within our region, we have a couple of really, I suppose, unique arrangements where particular territories within our region don't have a local territorial authority. They only have a regional council.
Yeah.
What happens with those under this process? Is that a proposal? We just stick that in our proposal and say what we think?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Nice.
Thank you. And as mentioned, there has been a considerable amount of work, so those functions are being looked at on what could be local, sub-regional or regional, with already the thought that there could be a regional shared services CCO or joint committee as well. So we've got Councillor Sanford, then Rotorua Tate, and then we might get some more information on the backstop process, check if there's any further questions, and then we'll look to our CE to go through our criteria and timeline.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just note to start this question off that a lot of ideas fall over because there wasn't consultation done on them in the beginning, whether they're good ideas or bad ideas, which just makes me a little bit nervous about moving forward on this because we're not going to be able, we just don't have the capacity or the capability to be able to consult widely to get a proposal in. And I'm just concerned that once we do get, maybe, potentially, we get a proposal and it gets approved initially, we then go out to consultation with our community and our community thinks something very different than what's in our proposal. And this comes back to Councillor Barker's, question is, at that stage, we've been initially approved by Cabinet. Can we withdraw from the process? What does that modification to that process or to our proposal look like at that stage?
So you can't withdraw, is what I would say. The Head Start was designed because when submissions were made on the initial simplifying, there were some councils that said, we are ready to go. So it's a voluntary process, you don't have to be part of it, but there were some councils, and it's not hard to pick which one. Some councils have already asked their communities if they want to be part of a bigger unit. So it is, once you're in, you're in. But that's why it's voluntary. So you don't have to go in if you don't want to.
My next question is specifically on that. You don't have to go in if you don't want to. But let's say Council A and B decide to create a unitary with Council C on your earlier eligibility criteria. C doesn't want that. They don't want to go in, but they're in it. And this comes back to, local communities having a say on what their representation looks like. This proposal, or the eligibility for this, specifically allows that to be taken away from those local communities and to go through this process, which they don't want to even be part of. And that gives me concern that we might...
So there's two parts to it. So yes, it would be an eligible proposal, whether it would meet the assessment criteria. So if you had a community that absolutely did not want to be part... So I'll give you a ridiculous example, right? Let's just say Wellington decided that it was going to take over Napier and Tasman, right? It was, two councils that aren't even close to it, right, on either side. Napier and Tasman would probably both say, hey, look, you're not our natural, our natural neighbour. No, we don't want to. That would be taken into consideration in the assessment criteria. And I don't think it would be hard to guess that it would be unlikely to succeed. So yes, you can have an eligible proposal can include an unwilling partner, but an unwilling partner is definitely taken into consideration for the eligibility, for the assessment criteria.
I'm not sure if this has been set out yet, but let's say we make that proposal and it's a proposal along those lines and you've got this unwilling partner in there. At that stage of assessing the proposals, do you go back to the submitter and say, hey, look, this criteria, we can see that this community is completely against it. Would you like to redo your proposal so it's just A and B submitting, or is it just crossed out entirely?
I think the Minister's intent was in a situation where you had all but one council in a region that wanted a regional unitary, that one would not stop the regional unitary. And if it was obvious that in a backstop situation that one would not be a viable entity, it could not undertake the regional functions, then I think what you will find is that unwilling partner does become part of that, which is a little bit different than if you have, say, in another one of my examples, you had two councils taking over three unwilling councils because they were majority of the population. The balance is a little bit different there. So the idea of Head Start is, as you know, because you're experienced elected members and you know local government, it's quite hard to get everyone to agree. And so what it wanted is, what Head Start wants is, you might not be able to get unanimous agreement even if it's the best thing for your region, right? That's a little bit different from a sub-regional proposal where you're trying to take over some of your unwilling neighbours. Do you know what I mean? There's just a kind of a little bit of a balance there. So, the straight answer is, could an unwilling person be part of a Head Start proposal? Yes, they could, but only really where it made sense. And when you considered what backstop might be, that the backstop for that single council would not be a realistic single unitary.
Thank you. And the good, really positive thing for the Bay of Plenty is we do work really closely with our other councils and our other mayors. But I have a personally made a commitment to them that I do not wish to force them into anything. We are seeing across the country there are a number of rural and provincial councils that do not wish to go with their larger metro, the higher population. We have seen time and time again when we've worked regionally that the bigger population centres always win out, whether that's in funding and resource or development, and the smaller ones are often left feeling marginalised with very little to show for the rates that they contribute into the wide region. So I am just curious on how this aligns with our responsibility, our mandate that's been given by our community. All councillors and mayors, we swear our oath to act in the best interest of the district. Now, it's quite challenging when the best interests of the district are, well, let's choose now before the government forces you to. So, in terms of what we may get out of this, I'd also like to ask, how far can we go in terms of requesting from government or ministers themselves for the support to enable the best interests of our district? And what I'm talking about is better funding and revenue tools, because I'm still yet to hear what the problem is that we're trying to solve, on why all councils across the country are having to have these really difficult discussions immediately after our elections, and it has not been prompted by our community, it has not been prompted by our main industries. So there is quite a disconnect between what we on the ground at a local level will believe will be the best interests in our district based on the experience that we've seen when you work regionally compared to many requests that have gone to government. And, you know, we're talking things like bed night levies, so that we can invest in economic development. We're talking things like keeping local voice when we look at the mega monster mergers of the removal of DHBs into a New Zealand entity. So whether it was health, tertiary education, or potentially our local councils next, it will be remiss to acknowledge that we are really wondering why the Minister would do this.
I think the stated benefit is fewer layers of local government, and what is meant by that is simpler decision making, greater joined up planning, so giving that Auckland example, and more efficient delivery of services. But I would also add, just as the government has signalled that it's going to amalgamate a number of government departments to make them work better, but also if I look at something like MCERT, I see a real opportunity for local government, because instead of having to go to the Ministry of the Environment, Transport that probably only regional councils ever talk to, MHUD and DIA, you have one door. And it is simpler, rather than having 4 doors, for you to have one door. And the same experience is true in central government. We have more than 70 doors. And so I think you can have better conversations, and simpler decision making means a number of things. It's simpler decision making for the person that needs to get a consent, because at the moment, particularly in this part of the world where your councils are quite close to each other, you can have quite different requirements in places. And that's the kind of feedback that ministers are hearing. It's complicated to do business with local government because they're all got different requirements. And I think when you look at things like joined up planning, I think one of the successes of something like Auckland has been that joined up planning. And if you look at things like transport committees, at the moment you have mayors. Some of them might work brilliantly, but otherwise there's quite a bit of kind of horse trading. You know, we all know that this kind of goes on, and it's very difficult, because what you're all elected to is what's best for your TA. You're not elected for what's best for the region. And so I think sometimes that does, from what the ministers have heard, it does undermine what's best for the region, because actually when you're elected for your area, you have to try and do what's best for your area, not what's best for the wider region. So I think when the ministers talk about benefits of fewer layers of local government, what they see is simpler but probably stronger decision making at a larger level that will provide benefits, both about efficiency of delivery but also that kind of strategic planning out into the future for a larger area.
Thank you. Just final point from me before we go to Rotorua Kaifong and then Councillor Lee. Thank you very much for that response. It is very interesting that the next mega merger of government agencies actually aligns what was a number of different agencies into a body that essentially fulfills the core functions of council. So what we would consider our core service is exactly what MCERT will now be delivering. But the changes, we've been doing this for a very long time, very efficiently, with very little revenue to do so, heavily relying on our local rates. So one of the questions I also have is, in order to assist in enabling new unitary authorities, in whatever form they may look like in terms of the revenue generated, will the Minister accept the calls from Council to pay rates on Crown buildings? It is a significant potential additional revenue that could assist. I know that councils have asked in the past. It is a very awkward question given the financially challenging times, but when councils are pushed to merge with others to find efficiencies, but at the end of the day, the number one problem from our perspective is we simply don't have enough revenue to deliver our central services. Can that be something we put in our proposal, either at a regional or a national level, to also encourage government to deliver on the many options and solutions that our local communities have put forward to support local decision making, local development?
Probably a couple of things to respond to that. I know that that was put to Minister Bishop at Rural and Provincial, so he has certainly heard that call for rates on Crown properties. In terms of can you put it in the proposal, the proposals will be assessed and then a certain number will be kind of chosen to go forward. And so I think it will, I mean, it's your proposal, you can put whatever you want into it. If you made it a condition of your proposal, it is less likely to be chosen for Head Start.
That answers the question. Thank you. Councillor Rotorua Kaifong and then Lee.
Thank you. Yes, we as a council try to always achieve a relationship of trust with our community, and with what we're going through now, that could well come under a bit of a cloud, because we're trying to do the best we can. And I actually feel that perhaps the Minister could communicate better to the wider community, to the wider public, about the opportunity that this presents for councils. For councils to be more attuned to what the community might want in the future, and that will help us to ensure that we're going to be working constructively with our community. I think it's really important because communications is everything, and it shouldn't just come from us. It should come from the Minister as to why he believes it's necessary and the potential for our communities to get a better deal in the future. And I think that would be something I'd like you to perhaps take back to the Minister. Communication is the key.
I'm happy to take that back.
Thank you.
Thank you. Deputy Kaifong.
Thank you. Sarah, up there you said we can have more than one unitary council in a region. If you just go back to your regional organisation option 4 slide, if, say, for example, there was the light blue, the mid blue, and then dark blue was just one council, so light blue is a couple of councils, medium blue is a couple of councils, and just say dark blue is just one council, does that qualify because effectively the light blue and the dark blue will need to agree, the light and the medium will need to agree the dark blue is able to stay alone? Is that able to be submitted as a Head Start proposal or not?
That is. The single council would need to be able to act as a unitary, so they would need to be able to perform the regional council functions. So yes, in theory, but if you're talking about a smaller council, that there's a question, the question that will arise, do they have the size to to be able to perform all of those functions of a regional council.
And then do we need the other two to consent as part of that joined up Head Start proposal that dark blue stays alone and the other two lots merge to let's say there were three unitary authorities?
So absolutely not a requirement, but utopia. Okay, so probably isn't going to happen. The ideal is a region gets together and puts in however many proposals, but the proposals create 3 unitaries in that region. And so if the whole region is covered, you kind of know what's happening, right? That's the ideal. You could put in 1 proposal or you could put in 3 and say, in the Bay of Plenty, this is how these councils will be formed. There'll be 3 unitaries. Each of those 3 unitaries still needs to be of sufficient scale that they could undertake those regional council functions. You could, in theory, say this community is so remote that it will use a shared service underneath. So in terms of simplifying local government, the idea is not that you create 3 unitaries and then you create something on top of it. The idea is if you have some unitaries and there are some functions that need to be across, that they might come underneath, so they would still be controlled by those 3 unitaries. There would be nothing that would control the 3 unitaries above. So you couldn't sort of support a unitary council, by having a board or a chair of a kind of chairs above that supported them. But what you could do is you could say, this rural community is so remote, actually it needs these regional council functions, and we're going to have a joint CCO. There may also be, so in a number of regions, again, Wellington is an example, the large urban centre actually supports, cross-subsidises the rural area for those regional council functions. So the Wairarapa, which a lot of Wellingtonians go to, they enjoy, they feel a connection to, public transport and a lot of those biodiversity, because the Wairarapa is a far bigger land area than the rest of Wellington. So you may, when you actually look at the numbers, go, we need to put a CCO underneath because we still need to continue that cross-subsidy, because while we might be separate unitaries, the Wairarapa and Wellington, for example, there's no special knowledge that I have that that's what's going to happen, but for that to work, there still needs to be some transfer of funds across. Does that make sense? Have I answered the question?
Can I jump in while you formulate? And I think maybe you're getting some of these questions based on advice I've given council based on my understanding, which is based on questions I've asked DIO officials previously.
Yeah.
And what I was told, and maybe if we can't answer it here, we take it offline and come back with the written response, is that example that the Deputy Mayor so adeptly gave you was one I have asked about before, and I've got a different answer to say that the resultant unitary cannot be simply the borders of an existing territorial authority. I've been given that answer quite strictly, so if I've got it wrong, that's important that we clarify that for council, but maybe we take that away as an action to confirm that.
That's not true in terms of an eligible proposal. So if you were given that advice, that is the advice that it wouldn't meet the criteria. Does that make sense? So an eligible proposal can in theory, when you look at the words, have a single territorial as a unitary. The advice that you would have been given would be to say, in their opinion, a single territorial would not be of sufficient scale to meet those economies of scale, probably would meet local voice, to be honest, but potentially the planning functions, etc.
Okay, maybe we'll work on that and come back to that.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Perhaps just on that note, and thank you very much for being here. I'm sure we've all found this incredibly valuable, but we are also mindful that this has been moving a lot, and you did note that the guidance will come out next week. So just on the guidance, is there an opportunity for us to just check in any draft proposal before submitting to ensure that it meets all the criteria? If there's any changes that we can make that will be more suitable. I don't know. Is that okay?
You can be assured that I will work closely with your team on their proposal, and I'll share what we're hearing from other. I'll share what we're hearing from other proposals. If there's any advice from the policy team about what should be in there, it may be a little bit of a moving feast, but absolutely, I will be happy to read proposals, happy to share any advice, clarify any questions.
Thank you very much. We'll just take some final questions from Councillor Lee, then Patterson, and we'll just get you to finish off with explaining the backstop process and the timeline for us. Thank you. Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Sarah. And like the Mayor, I'm struggling to understand the problem that's trying to be solved here. I just asked my friend AI to compare New Zealand with other Western countries. We've got one of the largest population per council ratio in the Western arena, with only one exception, United Kingdom. And Australia, New Zealand has 68,000 people per council. Australia is like 50,000. Norway is 15,000. Germany's 7,600. France is 1,900. So, I don't know. I don't even know what problem you're trying to solve.
I think this is one of the downsides of AI, because what AI doesn't show is the complexity of what those arrangements in the other countries are and what those councils do. So on a very simple reading, that might be true, but actually when you delve into that, you're not comparing apples with apples.
So I love local government. I love local decisions. I ran for council because I was troubled about the dumb decisions coming out of this chamber. And
Councillor Lee.
So I'm here.
Councillor Lee, can you please apologise and withdraw that comment? We're all elected here.
Because I was troubled about the unfortunate decisions, in my opinion, coming out of this chamber. So another thing that changed in 1989 was that schools were given boards. And that's another example of local government. My wife works in a school, and I was fascinated to listen to a conversation between the board chair, the principal, about where a door should go within the school. We need to put a new door. I mean, that is local government at its localist. So I don't see the benefit of having a Tokeroa councillor, a Taupo councillor, and a Potiki councillor, a Whakatane councillor, sitting around the table in this room deciding the future of a local golf course. Can you help me understand how that would work?
Could you see the future where you had a local board where decisions about the golf course were delegated to that local board, and maybe how often, what flowers to plant and where the crossings went? And I mean, there's a lot of opportunity in this. So if you want decisions to be more local, you've got to it's up for you. It's not a central government decision. Decide what area is local, and then decide which decisions you think should be made at that scale. So, and potentially give that local board some budget to spend. So, I mean, it's all like, the opportunity here is you could be more local than you are now. You may not be. You might be less local. It's totally up to you. But I totally disagree that this proposal or this opportunity means that you are definitely going to be less local. You actually might be able to get more voices than you do now.
Thank you, and I do appreciate that in the criteria it's quite clear, and things like economies of scale are the desired outcome of this. We're going to wrap up with Councillor Patterson and then get an update on the backstop.
Thank you, Your Worship, for your indulgence. And my question goes back to the dollars and cents of all of this. Yeah. Local water done well as an example. We are currently paying for oversight of what we're doing, so that costs us around about $500,000 a year. We had an estimate presented to us in the many, many millions of dollars of what it would cost us to implement local water done well if we choose to go down a certain path. Is there any funding going to come from central government to support us to implement this? This is a major overhaul, so who's going to carry the can for this?
There is no current funding available, but it might be something that you include in your proposal. What you think the costs of it might be.
Right, thank you.
But there is no current funding available.
Thank you. Nearby Waikato region, Waikato Mayoral Forum did request from the Minister financial support to undertake this, and that was declined. But we can always try. Thank you, Sarah. Would you like to explain the backstop now?
So, if you don't progress through Head Start, you will be subject to the backstop. The way that the backstop works is, if you're in Head Start, you've designed your new unitary council and whatever your democracy provisions are, and that council is elected in 28, new unitary. If you haven't and you're in backstop, the existing council is re-elected. So it looks a little bit more like that initial simplifying local government. There will be some regional councils won't exist, and there will be some arrangement. It may be a group of mayors, it may be some commissioners to oversee the regional council functions. The backstop model hasn't been confirmed. It's obviously going to be influenced by the Head Start process. So, for example, if in a region you do get a sub-regional proposal that's taken through Head Start, backstop will look different for the remainder of that region. It will all of the proposals in Head Start will ultimately influence what backstop looks like. So, it's unlikely that every proposal in Head Start is taken forward. Possible, but I would say unlikely. But that doesn't mean that information won't be considered as part of the backstop. Similarly, if I go to the timeline now, so we're between Head Start opening and the outline proposals being submitted. In September, outline proposals will be accepted by Cabinet. As the Minister Bishop have said, there's a little bit of wriggle room in the 9 August. There is not a lot. So we're sort of talking days or a week or two because Cabinet does need to make that decision in September. Once in September you've been accepted as a Head Start, you then have until March to submit your final proposals. So there will be a lot of work getting those detailed proposals together. And then between March and May, Cabinet will make final policy decisions, and then the legislation will be introduced in advance of those 2028 local body elections that you can see in October of 2028. So it will be introduced in Q3, Q4, and then enacted in Q1. Does that make sense?
Yep. We'll just see if there are any questions on it. Councillor Sanford, followed by Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a question about the regional councils. So we have, let's say we have a situation where ABC in a region set up their own unitary authority.
Yeah.
That's all accepted and that goes through, and then you're left with was that D, E, F?
Yeah.
And so, let argument's sake, the mayors of those councils, remaining councils, become the chairs of, or the governing body of what's left over of that regional council. Do you see problems around, that sort of remaining element of those regional councils being able to function? Because, a lot of their functions are going to have to be taken over by the new unitaries, and then you're going to have part of them that are left behind.
It's a good question. So in accepting ABC are a unitary, you would also be accepting that DEF could form a unitary and undertake those regional functions. So even though ABC might be an eligible proposal, and so let me go to a more extreme example. A to E, so 5 councils out of 6 say we will form a unitary and we'll undertake the regional functions. If they've left one little council by themselves and there is no way that can undertake regional functions, unless there's a home for that Head Start proposal won't be accepted. Now, it may be that there is a home for that in the adjoining region. Okay, so I can think of, remote communities that could actually join south or north, potentially. But sub-regional proposals have to have dealt with what you're going to do with the rest of the region. So there is a preference for a single region unitary authority. If you're doing something sub-regional, it only works if the rest of the remaining region works. If the rest of the remaining region doesn't work, it's not going to meet the criteria. You're going to be in backstop, and you're probably, then the regional functions in October 28 will be done at a regional level, not that sub-region that you submitted on.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Patterson, Wang and then Barker. I would like to wrap this up in 10 minutes as we have our LGP workshop at 1:30, so just to allow everyone enough time for a break. We'll go Patterson, Wang, Barker and then Maxwell.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a clarification of what you said earlier, the opening of this piece. You talked about the backstop approach and about councils who chose not to participate, that in the 2028 election, I think you said something like that council will be re-elected?
So, for example, Rotorua decides not to do Head Start. Rotorua will go into the 2028 election and Rotorua public will elect a Rotorua council exactly like you are today.
So it's the system will carry over?
The system will carry over.
Thank you.
Yeah. So regional councils won't. There will be no election for regional councils, but for territorial authorities, they will be elected, if they're not in Head Start, just as they were in...
Previously.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Worship, and through you. This is first part of the question was asked by Councillor Sanford. So just following on from that one. So for territorial authorities with more than one regional council, can you explain a little bit more about the context into this whole situation?
So territorial authorities with more than one regional council have a choice. They can, and there are a number of them. They can either go to one region or they can go to another region. The other thing is they could say our communities, actually some of our communities look north, some of our communities look south, or some of our communities look west, some of our communities look east, and actually decide to split. So, but that's not a central government decision. I think what that does is it shows the kind of complexity in this, and those are the situations where I'm saying it may be that a region gets together and says, this council, that's half in our region, we're uncertain about what we're going to do about, we're uncertain about how we're going to treat that, and we need more time because that is a detailed consultation with those members about which way they'd like to go.
Thank you. So you're saying that, like, for example, for us, where we have roughly a third of our district that is in Waikato Regional Council, that could, not saying it will happen, but it could be carved out.
Absolutely. If that community feels like they're part of the Waikato, then here is an opportunity to put them where they feel, to put them where they feel like their community is.
Thank you. And just very quickly, the last one, thank you for that. So I know that this is still being considered, but that specific, the membership of that interim body, again, in this context, how that is being considered with the, luckily we only have two, but I know some councils have more, how that membership, the Board of Mayors hybrid model,
that
whatever
backstop
it is.
will be determined. So the best of information that I have on the backstop is the initial simplifying proposal, but it hasn't been determined yet, and it will be influenced by what happens in Head Start. But it will be something along the lines of Board of Mayors, commissioners, that kind of arrangement. It won't be new elected people.
Yes, thank you. But then that would also mean that we would have membership on two.
Potentially, or potentially the government would decide you go one way or the other, or potentially the government decide that actually commissioners is simpler and there's no elected members on that interim board.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
This is a really interesting discussion for us as a council, because it's actually more than a third of our district lies within the Waikato region, and the remainder is the Bay of Plenty region. So I'm looking at this and saying, if we don't go through this Head Start process and actually put something forward, and we remain in the backstop process, then we will either A, be told what to do by the government and go, southwards and northwards,
Yeah.
potentially, to go with whatever groupings are around us, or we get caught up in a process. I'm just trying to understand this because the people I represent sit within this scenario. We end up with a board made up of, or two boards potentially made up of our southern and northern mayors. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it's interesting. Again, this is not in the cabinet paper. This is not necessarily what the ministers say. One advantage of being in Head Start, whether or not your proposal is accepted or not, is that you can give voice to how you would like that to at least process to play, if you know what I mean. So because Head Start will be taken into account for backstop, there is an advantage in putting in a Head Start proposal, because then you can say, we've got a complicated community. It doesn't necessarily just look one way or the other. And actually, your proposal could say, we think that, it could say, this is complicated and we need more time to think about it. Or it could say, we actually think, we know that this community feels like it belongs here and this community feels like it belongs there, because then it would be taken as part of backstop.
Thank you. Yes, the consideration, considering the two very clear catchments that we have going on as well. So that was very helpful. Thank you, in some ways. Thank you.
And we'll finish with Councillor Maxwell.
I have enjoyed your humble opinion being given as well. Thank you. Can I ask, is Gisborne working successfully?
Because that's the unitary authority.
Yeah, so my answer to that would not be to comment on whether it was working successfully. My answer to that would be to say that all unitaries, with the exception of Auckland, can form part of Head Start and therefore backstop. So it may be that no change has been made to those unitaries, but they are in the Head Start process, and therefore if they don't submit something, they are then in the backstop process, which could be no change, or it could be a new larger unitary.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Really appreciate the time that you've given us. Thank you so much for answering our questions to the best of your ability, and it's been really refreshing to hear your opinion on this as well. We value the experience and the thought process that you bring to this, and it certainly will help us in our decision making. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjourn the meeting here. We did have our criteria, proposed criteria, and also our council timeline, and when we come back at 1:30, we'll finish off those slides, and then we will carry on with our LTP workshop accordingly. So just gives everybody, including staff, enough time to have a little break. But we look forward to having a brief chat with you in the break too, Sarah. Thank you very much, everyone. We will be back in here and online at 1:30. Thank you. Ki tēnei hui o te kaunihera o ngā roto o Rotorua. Welcome back, everyone. We are going to pick up where we left off. We are currently finishing off our workshop for the Head Start, in particular the Simplify Local Government proposals. We have had Sarah from DIA present. Thank you very much once again. And now we are going to just finish off our council slides. We have our proposed criteria, decision-making process and the timelines. Immediately after that, once we've had any time for any questions, if there are any, we will then take a 5-minute break and start on our long-term plan workshop. So thank you very much for bearing with us as we discuss some pretty major topics today. But I'll now hand over to Sam to take us through the proposed criteria for us to consider. Thank you.
Kia ora. So we had a few slides on here, but they were very well covered by Sarah, so we won't go over those again, but we'll go through the Rotorua specific ones and I guess how the process will work with all of us or could work with all of us over the next wee while based on decisions that you make. So the first one we have here is using the criteria that we currently have for the Head Start, and we'll refine this a little bit once we get the proposal documents, are 6 of what our high-level criteria that we think we'll be looking at when we're assessing potential partners if we decide to progress down the Head Start process. And so I think those are up there. Everyone's capable of reading, I think. But so yeah, the communities of interest and alignment with Rotorua district communities. So again, what's in there, but really giving it that Rotorua lens. And one of the ones that was mentioned by Councillor Timara Benfeld is the iwi views on how proposed arrangement meet current commitments. And so that's really the focus of what currently exists that regional council looks after and ensuring that those flow through. And so while the settlements are with central government and the discussion has been that those would flow through as whatever happens, we think that it's important as part of our proposal, if we made one, was that to highlight what those might be and working with regional council as well as iwi, obviously, how those work. Another one's the economic alignment.
Sorry, if I can just jump in and add to that. We also have some quite bespoke arrangements here in terms of protocol agreements, etc., which we would need to, well, we're proposing for council's consideration and feedback before your decision. That's something that we assess as part of the proposal or part of the options for what ultimately is a proposal, and we think that's one of the key 6 criteria. So we've got it up there.
Yep, spot on.
And also joint consents that we have for waters.
Yep, spot on. And then the next one is the economic alignment between the proposed districts. So we see this as an opportunity to ensure that one of the things we consider is the economic alignment. So we're not necessarily with partners that don't align economically with us. So whether that's forestry, farming, geothermal, tourism, the things that are big drivers for us that might not be big drivers for some of our nearby councils, that will be one of the lenses that we look at to ensure that it's a partnership that makes sense. Then the next one's the Rotorua voice and proportional political representation in the proposed option. So I think to Councillor Lee and other points earlier is understanding that local voice and that localism, and I think which was quite well put by Sarah, is that this is actually potentially an opportunity that we get better local voice than we've had before. And so not using Auckland as the perfect example, like Sarah was also not trying to, but some of the decisions that those local boards make are the decisions that councils across the country, I think councillors come onto council to make those decisions, but then realise, and I'm not saying that's any of you here, but actually they come onto council and realise that the majority of the decisions they make are actually not about things that they're passionate about, whereas actually if we've made it really clear that a local board or a local whatever make decisions in a local community and they have a budget for a local community, that might be more enticing for them to be at a broader board or something. But again, that's something that can be worked through in that space, and also that will come through a lot when we do the public engagement, I imagine.
If I can just add to that, again, if we keep in mind what we're proposing that these criteria are used for, is they're used, we're proposing that they be used to inform council decision making, because the Local Government Act still applies, and that councils are obligated to make decisions in a systematic manner. And so we'd propose that we use these criteria to then test different options and bring you that analysis, and then council can decide on this basis. So again, similar to how we would establish a multi-criteria framework. Obviously, we're not talking about any weightings here, but establish a multi-criteria framework, and then we'd go away and test the options against those and bring them back to you for your consideration. So in this particular criteria, potentially, if that was quite important to this council, then in a arrangement where Rotorua communities had a smaller political representation, that option may not score as highly, whereas in a arrangement where Rotorua communities had more of a political representation, then that option might score more highly. So just to step through how that might be used in assessing the options that come to you in future.
Nice. And then probably an obvious one, the ability to deliver the 5 priorities in the government policy is probably a key one to look at, because there's probably no point in us moving forward if it's not going to meet the government's priorities. And another key one is the financial health of the council. So, and that's probably financial health and viability. So what the other one's financial health is, but also probably the viability of us and a partner being able to exist into the future. And I know that's in the Waikato, they're very focused on that, because there's, like was talked about earlier, the regional council subsidies for those outside of Hamilton are quite heavy, and so we'll have to do some work from understanding from both regional councils how that works in our region specifically and our potential partners. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions on that, if there are any.
Thank you. Start with Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Mayor Tapson. Just going on from that, but my question was around, we haven't specifically acknowledged it, but the catchment management part of this equation is quite big, and it's obviously a focus for the government as well. So I'm guessing that's actually in the ability to deliver the 5 priorities, because there's a whole lot of rivers with significant catchment arrangements running through both our district and our neighbours. So is just to flag it as a key piece of work or consideration.
Yeah, I agree, and it probably does sit with that ability to deliver the 5, because that's part of it, but again, in a few other places. But yeah, I agree, that's very important.
Yeah, and if I can add that in the government's policy document, they've only identified 3 services that they really expect the proposals to have answered how they're going to deliver. So that's catchment management, transport, and implementation of the new planning system. As we heard from Sarah earlier today and is outlined in the document, other services and how they're delivered in the future could be one for the detailed design phase to work out.
Just check if there are any more questions. Councillor Sandford?
Thank you, and this might have been a better question for Sarah. But just in terms of, and we submit a proposal, and I'm just, obviously we have limited amount of staff and staff hours, and like, if we submit a proposal, we obviously want it to be successful. But then on the flip side of that, we haven't gone through consultation to a degree that I think many of us would be satisfactory with to back that proposal up. Is there any indication from the DIA at the moment around the level of detail that is required? I'm just aware that we might be tying ourselves in knots at an early stage when there's actually better outcomes in the more detailed analysis. And
the guidance that will come out in the next week, I think, will be really useful for having a good understanding of what you need to include and to what level of detail in the proposal.
Yeah, and if I can say, when we get to the timeline, the reason we've foreshadowed that your approval of the community engagement plan comes after that comes out and we've had a chance to digest it. So we've tried to sequence those decisions based on when we understand the information is going to be available.
Councillor Timura Benfield.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Just a question regarding economic alignment. So in that I suppose in that assessment part, is it around, are we ensuring that our economies are aligned in terms of what we do, or is it more, are we also looking for complementary economic bases? So I think primarily to geothermal is something we're really keen on supporting. It's not necessarily in alignment economically with Taupo and Kawerau, because we don't do that, but potentially it's a complementary part of an economy that we're keen to support. So is that all part of the process? We're not just looking for who's similar to us, eh?
Yeah. And ultimately these criteria are our suggested criteria, so it's really up to all of you in the room to decide how they fit into those. But I think, in my mind, what you're saying is the exact type of thing that we'd be thinking about. Yeah,
and I think that's definitely where, if we can hit some of the things that we've been focusing in our conversations a lot on, in terms of some of the economic development, economic alignment stuff. Likewise with our economy and tourism and things like that, supporting employment in other areas, because it's a high, a low qualified background. So yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just looking at the government criteria versus the list that you've got up there, I think if I have distilled the conversation correctly, there's potentially a local water done well overlay with this, and we've had conversations around wherever we end up for this, we should seriously think about putting the waters together. It doesn't seem to make sense to have it somewhere else.
Councillor, I might take that question, and I agree that there's been discussion on this before. I think the sequencing of these decisions is conducive to us considering whether we're accepted as one of the Head Start proposals before you make your final decision on waters. When I started drafting this list, there were about 50 different criteria, but I've tried to pull it up a level to this. And again, to Councillor Tamara Benfell's point, you don't have to make them questions here. You can make suggestions because it's a workshop. It's for us to take on board your feedback. So I'm going to take Councillor Tamara Benfell's question as input, and I'm going to take your question as input, and we can, as we flesh out those criteria, we can register those as options, as criteria to assess the options against.
Thank you. And we will have a number of touch points. We have 3 council decisions as well. What this does is provide direction through this workshop for our staff to start collating the information that you see best for when we do make those decisions. We'll go to Councillor Sanford in just a second. I just wanted to also note that I'm not really seeing environment up there, in particular catchment. So if you could just also take that on board, like you could consider that communities of interest as an example, iwi boundaries, mai makituki tongariro, also the interest that we have in the Kaituna River if we were to go all the way down that catchment. So it's probably a given that we're considering that, but just making sure that we are for when it comes back to a council decision. Thank you. Councillor Sanford, followed by Timera Benfell.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Just in terms of possible suggestions as well on this, something along the lines, and I'm just borrowing language from earlier in the day, designing local government in the way that best fits our community. Like if we can have something in there that we're actually not just, moving chess pieces around, but actually moving it forward to make it actually better for our communities, I think that would be really helpful too. Yep, agree.
Councillor Timera Benfell.
Just to expand on our Councillor Brown and I's conversation from earlier this morning, perhaps a more broader criteria is around operational alignment or service delivery alignment between councils altogether. Because if we're operating not just within our a proposed water CCO, if we are operating on completely opposite ends of the spectrum in how our staff operate, it makes it an important risk for us to understand how we amalgamate and integrate with the council. We've got nothing in common operationally. So, yeah, I wondered if that's a potential criteria around our operational alignment. Doesn't necessarily have to be across the board, but certainly in some of those key areas like water, environment. Some of those other might be licensing or something like that, our regulatory services or something like that. So, yeah, maybe it's a broader piece than just looking at our water and our other infrastructure. So, yeah, since we're throwing out suggestions.
Yeah, thank you. And I might also just note through the Bay of Plenty Meal Forum already, regardless of the Simplify, we were already had tasked our CEs to look at what potential shared services, what efficiencies could we get. So there is a piece of work on that, and as soon as those functions are confirmed, we'll bring it back to you as well, so you can really dive down into the what do we still want to keep locally, what would we be okay going sub-regionally. Thank you. We've got Patterson and then Barker.
Thank you, Worship. Just, I guess, carrying on to that same topic, it's how would our existing debt, infrastructure liabilities and deferred renewals be treated under a unitary authority? So from a small scale, would things, I don't mean to be derogatory, but would something like ongoing maintenance of a community hall then become the responsibility of a local community board rather than going right up to the top to a unitary authority? How would all of those kind of discussions and conversations happen?
Councillor, I think that's a level of detail we haven't, certainly I haven't turned my mind to yet. But if I step back to the criteria, potentially that's what we might look at in terms of the financial health of the councils. And again, given the time frame, quite hard to do in any great level of detail, but using published figures around debt, potentially depreciation, etc. It would, in the time we've got, it would be our finance team and the teams of other potential councils working together to get us the best information we can on that. The level of detail of individual assets is either one for the detailed design phase or potentially to be solved after the 2028 elections.
Thank you. I kind of figured that a big piece of work like this would eat up much of our resources. And what I was concerned about is that these issues have been on our table for a number of years now, and with this rearing its ugly head, there's a very good chance that they'll be shoved down the line again. So more deferred renewals, things not being done because our focus is placed elsewhere, and that's understandable.
Maybe I'll say, Councillor, we're certainly very focused as well on delivering the annual plan and what was signed off by Council in that program. I don't see the delivery of services like that being affected at all by this work. I'm trying to work out a team that I prioritize policy, finance, analytic work rather than operational work on the delivery of services that this council has approved for the next annual plan. Through the long-term plan process, of course, which we'll get to soon enough, will be a question about if the future is uncertain, then what's the level of detailed planning that happens to subsequent years. Although, again, you will, according to the government's timeline, you will hear back a cabinet decision before we get that far down the long-term plan process anyway.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you. It's not explicit here, but I just want to raise it again because it reared its head at the end of the presentation, is that this district is quite unique, that it straddles two regional councils, and we also are one of the few councils of 7, I think it is, across the country that do that. We also have a significant population in the other half that's towards the south, which a lot of the other councils don't have. And not only that, when I mentioned catchment management before, but within those, the catchments that we have, the management systems are quite different. So I want to highlight the fact that we are quite unique in that respect, and how we address that cross-boundary uniqueness that we have in our district, I think just deserves some considerations, because the people that, are in the rural ward will be very interested to hear how we're going to manage that dynamic. Thank you.
Thank you. Noted. Councillor Temero Benfell.
Kia ora, thank you, Your Worship, and through you. Just a question, so with I'm just reading here, the criteria around iwi views on how proposed arrangements meet current commitments. I wonder if because I suppose some of the views that we need to capture within that particular space are not necessarily just iwi views. Some of the most significant entities that we need to engage with are Māori land entities, hapu trusts. So I wondered if there's either a more capture term that we can use, or if we can be a bit more specific, because even iwi as well, within that we've got PSGEs, which we are legally mandated to engage with, and then there's other entities that we're not necessarily but need to. So I just wonder if iwi was a bit too broad to be a criteria, if we can either be more specific or a term that captures all of those groups can be used. I'm not sure if maybe Michelle and Paul might be best to sort of nut out what that might look like, but yeah, that's my initial thoughts on iwi, because some of our also our te tato partners as well, they're not an iwi, so how do we capture their voice as part of this criteria as well? So yeah, those are just that's where my thinking is on that particular criteria.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that box was actually we had a bit of a round and round about that. It doesn't cover all the views that, not that it should be in a box, but that box does need to cover in the considerations that covers. But yeah, let's have a think about how we word that better.
Yeah, I think even I suppose maybe for a later time, but with the advice from Michelle and Paul, potentially Te Arawa views on how our proposed arrangements meet current commitments is maybe the catch-all, knowing that we have different criteria that we meet under our different arrangements and different protocols and all that sort of stuff. So that might be potentially the correct term, but keen to hear from the experts on that rather than just put it out of the table off the top of my head.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for raising that, and there's a real opportunity through Te Tato Aotearoa, who have very generously offered to assist, even through a secretariat role, to collect iwi views, entity views, and we will go to the timeline later, but potentially moving that forward has been raised by some councillors as well. So thank you. Okay, there appear to be no further questions, so I'll move to the next slides.
So the next slide is, and then the following slide does it in more detail, but is the three key council decisions that we see as needing to be made through here. So the first decision is, does the council wish to proceed with investigating a Head Start proposal or prefers to opt to the backstop? So the purpose of the workshop today is, it's a workshop, so it's not a decision-making forum, is to give you a level of information. You've heard from DIA as well, to have that in your heads, and then the first council meeting will be, actually, do we spend more time working on this, or are you comfortable that we don't do any more work on it and we're just part of the backstop? Being part of the backstop might mean that we end up submitting something, whether it's not a full proposal, but just our views on where we'd like to see ourselves in the backstop if that happened, and so that's a valid decision to make. The second decision is around which criteria. So we've been talking about those criteria, but really getting tighter on those criteria, and our suggestion would be at that point probably reduce the number of partners that we're looking at amongst those criteria. So we're not looking at every single possibility, because we won't have the ability to do that. So making a reasonably informed decision at that point, what are the options that we narrowed that down to. And then the third decision will be, we'll come back with the analysis of the, shortlist, if you want to do it, if you want to call it that way, and then council to decide which of those shortlisted ones, or it could be a new one comes out of that, and elect to go on a Head Start. And so all of those allow an off-ramp too. So the first one, you can decide as council to opt for the backstop or not submit a proposal. The second one can do the same thing, and the third one again. So it provides an opportunity for council at every step of the way, based on community feedback that will be given growing in this, and I imagine all of you out there talking about this and hearing about this, as well as interpreting what you're seeing as hearing, deciding whether we proceed or allow the backstop to happen. Any questions, comments on that?
My suggestion will be take 1 and 2 together on the same day. In the interest of timeliness, we just want to get out and consult with our community as soon as possible. So it'll just be my suggestion for now. Councillor Lee, followed by Patterson.
I'll refrain from my questions for the moment in light of your latest comment. So move to the next councillor, if you would, please.
Okay, Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm looking ahead to when we start getting to the nitty-gritty and we start getting provided with information about various topics that we're covering, particularly the economic side of things. We've heard how important catchment management is to this decision, in particular assessment of the whatever option we choose. Is it possible to have the Tarawera catchment included in that information, please?
Councillor, we're pretty early days yet. We haven't. Council hasn't made a decision yet to proceed with this because it's a significant amount of resources to get on with this, and if it's talking to partner councils, working with them to understand some of this information, maybe we'll take it as or hearing some common themes around concern around catchment, and that be addressed in both our analysis and what we finally bring you. So maybe all we can do at this stage is take that as an action for us to look into and give you some advice on. And it may be that if some catchments are already within the boundaries of this district, it might be easier to give you an answer on those or give you some advice on those. And when they're not, it might be a little bit more different. But we hear that you're interested in having that addressed.
Thank you.
It's Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can we agree to start with that this is a significant decision in terms of the significance and engagement policy?
So we're getting some advice on that at the moment. So local government NZ's providing some advice to all councils about where it sits in terms of significance and engagement, but also the engagement obligations that sit in and around that. So probably until we've received that, we won't answer that question. We want to be consistent with all other councils on that.
Sorry, just to be clear, that's not far away. We're expecting it yesterday or today, so I just haven't checked whether we've got it from LGNZ. It's legal advice.
Well, I can scarcely believe that the future of our council could not be a significant decision. Your comment, Mayor Tapsell, about putting this out for consultation, which is a requirement under the Local Government Act, after we make decision 2, we wouldn't be consulting on what criteria will be used to assess a potential partner council. Surely, what the public will be interested in being consulted on is which particular.
You've completely misunderstood me, Councillor Lee.
Okay, help me out.
Oh, I don't think I can help you. What I've said is, in the interest of timeliness, Decision 1 and Decision 2 will take it the next possible council meeting so we can just officially get on with it. Right now we're giving our staff direction. To be fair, and we have mentioned this, although I said we'd like to consult with our community, that's just to the best of our ability within the timeframes. It is not the formal consultation that we're used to, but it is with the interest of timeliness, we will go out and hopefully engage with them as soon as possible, bearing in mind that formal consultation has been highlighted as part of the Head Start proposals for the end of 2026-27.
So are you saying that central government haven't given us enough time to comply with the Local Government Act?
Well, that's what we're getting advice on. And so really, while the decision to move into to submit a Head Start proposal is the decision of the council. The decision of whether we get reorganised is a decision for central government. So ultimately we're submitting a proposal like we submit a proposal on any cabinet direction, and then ultimately the legislation and those types of things flows through from that. But again, I would like to see that legal advice to understand that. So I suppose we're not the ones that are changing the way that representation happens. We have the opportunity to potentially have a say in what that happens, but central government is going to be the body who ultimately decides the way that local government will be reformed across Aotearoa.
So that sounds like you're anticipating that this isn't a significant decision in terms of the significance and engagement policy.
I wouldn't know I'm not involved in procuring that advice or having seen that advice, so I can't put any guesses on that until I've seen that. But yeah, more than happy to. We'll share it with all of you as soon as we get that.
Okay.
So if we perhaps move on now, because we're starting to talk about timelines. We have seen in the next slide the government timeline already, so we can go to the next one, but just emphasising that May is when the final decision on what proposals go forward. Next year.
Yeah. So we'll skip over the government one because I think that was covered quite a lot. And so here's our proposed. I think it's actually clearer on that screen than that screen. This is our proposed one. So we've got those. Is that a pointer? No, I need Andrew can point his little pointer. I thought that one had one on it. So we've got the 8th of June, the 24th of June, and the 29th of July are those three council decisions that we were talking about. And so I'll deal with a public engagement perspective because I know that's something that lots of people are interested in, and obviously, given it's one of the areas that I get the fortune of working with, is something that is close to my heart too. So that's likely to change. So that would come right back to the 8th of June area. So regardless of whether we go with the Mayor's suggestion to have those two meetings together, that's the point where the public engagement would begin anyway. And so the public engagement will be around probably the same criteria that we've been talking about. So really understanding the public's views. It's not going to be a full public, at this stage, a full public consultation because we don't have the time and space to do that, but that allows 3 weeks for the public to have their say on that and our community to really put their voices forward so that you can then have that information when you're making the decisions on which way to proceed in that 29th of July decision. And so, as you can see on the way, there's a few other things along the way. So we've just tried to map out very high level what the different things we have already ongoing to where we could get little touch points on that, but it's probably quite subject to change. But yeah, anything else to add on that, Andrew?
Yeah, I'd just like to add this is the challenge with, and that's why it's important to use the right terminology. It's not consultation as such, as defined, as commonly understood in local government context, because we don't have the time to put together the detailed analysis that we would normally on a public consultation topic, such as we've been used to and such as we're planning for together with the long-term plan. If I use an example of some of the topics we're planning to consult on together with the long-term plan, we've had a long time to put together detailed assessment, pros and cons. Councils would deliberate, make a decision on what their preferred option is, model that financially in great detail, and then consult, which this timeline doesn't allow for us to do that. So we're just trying to find, on the basis of feedback, what are some of the feedback we can get without following strictly that format of consultation.
So we'll open up for questions, but I will just emphasise that this is exactly the challenge that us and all councils across the country are facing. It's outside of our normal process, but the government has been clear this is a voluntary process for those that do wish to get ahead with the Head Start. But it is also confusing. I want to acknowledge when we hear from ministers, make the choice yourself or else. And so whether this will change what we have for our community in 2028 or the following election is really the opportunity for us now to put forward a proposal that makes sense. The 29th of July council decision for the 9th of August deadline. The main thing I'd like you to focus on is whether or not we wish to participate in the Head Start proposal or not. Bearing in mind we will then have the following year up until May next year for knowing whether or not Cabinet will accept that to move forward. So there still is a lot of uncertainty. We have had feedback from councillors already about potentially shifting that Rotorua 2050 Vision Committee forward, but I just ask now if there's any feedback or questions that you have on the draft timeline. Councillor Te Mara Benfell, followed by Patterson.
Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. I wondered, is there any scope for us to approve budgets for that additional or that, I suppose, innovative consultation process of some description? I have seen reports from councils across the country where they've actually identified specific funds to either support the secondment of additional community champions to champion some of this stuff, or support the costs of working groups or things like that. Is there scope for us to do that? It doesn't have to be an enormous amount of money, but is there scope for us to do that to ensure we do as good a job as we possibly can under the circumstances?
Councillor, why don't we consider those options and bring them to you for 8th of June?
Yeah, great.
And so, sorry, one thing I forgot to mention is that we already have a draft comms and engagement plan for this. So we sent it to the Mayor last night, and so we'll send that out to councillors over the next couple of days, just so that they can see at a high level what we're thinking around comms and engagement, and obviously welcome all your feedback on that.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Worship. What exactly, sorry, refresh my mind, what are we deciding on the 8th of June?
At this stage, all that we're deciding on the 8th of June is whether we continue looking at whether we head down the Head Start process, or you decide that actually we don't want to and we go down the backstop process. So at the moment, our suggestion, that was all that you'll discuss. We'll bring a little bit more information than we were able to bring today to that meeting, but at the moment that was all that we were targeting.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, why that's important is this process, as Sarah mentioned earlier, it needs friends. And in order to proceed and be clear to other councils that this council's, either seriously looking at making friends or not looking at making friends, it's important to have a council decision on that. And that also then means that we can start to align other councils whom we might want to talk to their decision making. Informally speaking to number of other chief executives, they're also looking at effectively a 3-decision process. Yeah, everyone's got their own variations and their different ideas, but I guess ultimately to line up, well, the intention was to line up, and of course we can always be different, those decision points, similarly at least with councils who we want to be talking to and working with together.
Thank you. I had a sneaking suspicion that's what it was, but is there another opportunity for us before the 24th of June to have another workshop for us to throw more ideas around and test more theories, get some more advice from the likes of David and his team on the economic side of things? Is there any opportunity for that?
Well, sounds like the Mayor wants to say something, but I'd just say we were asked by the Audit and Risk Chair to use the Audit and Risk Committee meeting, which I think is on the 16th of June, 16th or 17th of June, to have that type of discussion. That hasn't been confirmed, but again, this is a proposed draft, and we'll take your feedback about if a further workshop is supported. Keeping in mind, obviously, our ability to turn around and give you materials before a workshop when we're really working week to week is quite challenging. So with your indulgence that you may not get the materials far in advance, then that's obviously more likely.
Understand the situation we're in. And just a comment, you talk about the comms and engagement. Today the media was here, so I think the comms start today. You'll find that out, I imagine, in due course.
Yeah, and the Mayor's already put out a release on that, and early next week we'll have the website skin and all of that type of thing up, ready for that. So yeah, we're well aware that actually probably from the point that the Minister announced it, that comms, for want of a better term, has already started.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Rotorua, followed by Timera Benfell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really feel that we're starting to overthink this whole exercise. It's likely to be, it seems to me it's getting bigger than Ben-Hur. Of course it's significant for the community, and after listening to Sarah this morning, we've had the iwi chairs earlier this week. We've got to be in our own minds clear that there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity for us to look at a different way of presenting local government to our community, to the ratepayers. And I think the big thing is, when we do communicate, we keep it simple. I mean, we speak a language of our own, assets, depreciation. I was noting some of those words that we talk about. We talk to each other because we think we know what we're talking about. But our community, all they want to know is we're making good decisions with their money. And so I just hope that we should actually be the advocates ourselves for an opportunity to change. Everyone sitting around this table should be the advocate for change that we know will assist our community. And in particular, I'd like to see our young folks, our young people who have got their families, who want to know that they're going to be living in a community that they can see themselves remaining in, bringing their children up in, and wanting to stay here. So I think we should have already by now pretty much be in favour. Let's look to see what this might look like. Let's get the work done and let's plough on.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. Sorry, just only one point on that is that, as you'll see when we send the comms and engagement plan through, we're very much focused on plain English, because terms like the backstop and the head start and those types of things, so we've tried to convert it as much as possible into plain language so that our community, if they want to, can get in behind this.
Okay, thank you.
We're going to take some final points and then we'll conclude and get on with our LTP workshop. So we'll go Councillor Timera Benfell, Lee, and then Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship, and just through you. So just to be clear for my own thinking and preparation, so 24th of June, as we are being presented with that's when we're presented with the actual options that could be feasible to move forward with, or is that 29th of July in terms of structure?
What we had anticipated is that we would do a narrowing of all of the options. Again, I never want to overcomplicate things, but many sections of the Local Government Act require us to consider all the options. There's been a signal in the policy announcement of what some of the parameters are. We're proposing to do a very rough assessment of the high-level options and bring those to you with some recommendations of which to remove and discount and discontinue on the 24th of June, and then proceed from that point onwards to analyse as Sam said, the shortlisted ones in detail for a 29th of July discussion. But look, we're open to considering other ways of sequencing that.
Nice. Just one further question. I'm sure you've already thought about it. Is there anywhere in that timeline going to be another opportunity for a secondary iwi chairs forum? Because I can't see any other date identified yet.
Yeah, so yet is probably the key. So I think some work has been done in that space to understand where that was. So these primarily, except for one of these council meetings, are already existing meetings, and so that is more a representation of what's already on the calendar that we could feed in things, but there will be more things like council workshops or iwi chairs meetings or business chamber meetings, all of those types of things will be things that come up in and around those spaces.
Great. And just something for you, for I suppose staff to be mindful of, is that from probably about the 5th to 6th of July, Te Ao Māori shuts down for Matariki. So between that whole week is all the festivities and public holidays, and we're away with whānau and all that sort of stuff. So being cognizant of our iwi chairs during that period of time, that 4, 5, 6 days of Matariki, I think is very important. So my recommendation would be very early July, if possible, for a secondary forum, or slightly before that 15th workshop on public feedback and update on assessments would be a recommendation, would be very late June, even directly after the council decision, and yeah, very early July.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. And also, councillors, on the 8th of June, what I anticipate is I can bring forth some actual visuals, some maps that have more confirmation of councils that would be open to us participating in a Head Start program alongside us. So although you may have seen Western Bay and Whakatane have already gone out with their communications, what I'm seeking to achieve is similar to a workshop or a council meeting, a formalisation. So it's not just a discussion between a mayor who said, yes, we could be keen, but it's actually a council who said, yes, we are doing Head Start and we would be open to Rotorua. So we should have more to share with our wider community from early June onwards as well, but we will get that to you as soon as possible. We will go Councillor Lee and then finish with Brown.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am probably, I don't mind investigating a Head Start, but I'm...
Oh, sorry, can you just pull a little closer and find out how to...
I'm certainly interested in exploring the backstop option. Think it would be rather interesting if all of the councils in the Bay of Plenty took that approach. I'm concerned that there's been no select committee process by the government to get us to this point. I'm concerned that we don't have time to properly engage with the community about the future of this. And I do have a question, and if I understand correctly, Alex, did you work for Auckland Council? Do you have any specific
Councillor
experience?
Lee, that is completely inappropriate to ask those questions, and we apologise to our staff.
So I was wondering if there's any evidence that this actually results in lower rates for the ratepayers. Is that what happened in Auckland?
Councillor Lee, what I'm going to do is after this meeting I will invite you to apologise to staff for mentioning them personally in a completely inappropriate way. And what we're going to do is we're going to wrap this up with Councillor Brown. We all have concerns on this, but what I am happy to confirm is that there are no other councils in the Bay of Plenty region, based on the significant amount of discussion I've had with mayors, that are seeking to do the backstop option. As we know, if we choose to be in denial at what is coming our way, then we could actually end up in a backstop option of being merged as either an entire region or with bigger population councils, which we have not expressed any interest to do so yet. So we will see how this continues, and a decision will come to council on the 8th of June. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm not looking to prolong this any longer than necessary, but I wonder if the CE could address this in one of the upcoming either audit and risk or the decision. We've got an awful lot of work underway around the LTP particularly. I'd like some assurance or analysis and assurance that we're not going to drop the ball because we've got too much going on. So if we could perhaps address that in one of the upcoming meetings.
We'll probably talk about it in about 15 minutes' time, I think.
Okay, yep, we'll do that then. Thank you.
Thank you. And our long-term plan is our business as usual. That first and foremost must remain all of our priorities. But look, thank you very much, everyone. We will wrap this up here. Thank you to our staff. Once again, thank you to Sarah from DIA for joining us. And this has been live stream. Will be available on our website for public. And we'll wrap it up here. We will just have a quick break, and at let's say 2:30, we'll come back and we'll begin with our long-term plan workshop. Thank you.